A good Erev Shabbos, everybody. And we begin with Birchas Kohanim. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe Leimer, daber al Aaron v'albanav Leimer, kesevarechu es b'nei Yisrael amar lahem. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Yoir Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. V'samu shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani avarachem. It's a very, very special Shabbos for the Chabad community, for the Jewish community, and for the world. Tomorrow is the 10th day of the month of Shevat. And on the 10th day of the month of Shevat, it is the yahrzeit, this year the 71st yahrzeit of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. And it's the 70th anniversary of the official ascending to the leadership of Chabad of our present-day Rebbe. You know, historians like to look at what they call pivotal moments in time. If you just look at history in general, there are volumes and volumes and volumes of details that can define each and every decade of history. Once you start getting into the details, it's endless. Thousands of volumes can define a generation, especially a century. But what historians like to look at are those events that can be pointed to and shown that particular moment changed the direction of a country, or in some cases, the moment that changed the world. A pivotal moment, which means everything that followed was affected by this particular moment. You can call it a spark that ignited a flame that illuminated the world. And history moves both in the negative and the positive by these triggers. For us as Jews, we can look at some of these pivotal moments of our history. I'll give you some examples. Lech Lecha, when Abraham is sent on a journey to start a new nation, with that one verse, it changed everything in history that was to come after. Nothing is the same because of one particular verse, one particular mission, one particular journey, one particular commandment. Joseph becomes viceroy over all of Egypt, eventually leading to the rest of his family moving to Egypt and setting the stage for the exile and ultimately the exodus that we celebrate in this week's particular portion. Again, a pivotal moment, one verse in the Torah. Pharaoh selects Joseph to become viceroy. Nothing after is the same because of that one verse. We could look at the burning bush. We could look at the Mount Sinai experience and the revelation, the entering into the promised land, the building of the temple, the destruction of the temple. All of these are pivotal moments that changes everything that comes thereafter. And I open with this because I say with confidence that the 10th day of the month of Shevat, which we celebrate tonight and tomorrow, will be looked at by historians, especially Jewish historians, as one of the key moments of Jewish history, not just in regards to the 20th and 21st century, but all of Jewish history. The coming together of the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe, a day that marks a celebration of each, the yahrzeit of one, the ascending to the leadership of the other, and this partnership and the passing of the torch of these two great giants has affected every single Jew on the face of the earth. When the previous Rebbe first came to the shores of this country in 1940, when he first arrived, he stayed at a hotel in Manhattan called the Greystone Hotel. And between the torture and the persecution that he suffered at the hands of the Russians and what the Nazis put him and his family through, physically, he was a broken man. He was already confined to a wheelchair. His health was not good. But spiritually, he was a powerful force of energy and determination. From the moment of his arrival, he began organizing yeshivas and shuls and mikvahs and publishing houses, building back then in 1940 this dynamic infrastructure for Torah Judaism in the free world. He wouldn't accept that America is going to be different. No, we're going to create Judaism and Jewish life and Jewish growth and a Jewish renaissance here in this country. And many leaders of the American Jewish establishment of that time, they came to him and they said, Rebbe, this is America. It's not Europe. You're here. You're safe. You have your small group of followers. Find a nice home. Get some good medical attention and write your memoirs. That's what you do here in this country. You relax. Things here are different than in the old country. What you're trying to do here won't fly in American culture and environment. American Jews don't want this. They want to be free. Let it go. But the Rebbe was very clear, America will not be different. It's going to happen here. And that torch of Judaism, of Jewish learning, of Jewish living, is not going to be extinguished. It wasn't extinguished, not by the Bolsheviks, said the previous Rebbe, not by the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, and it will not be extinguished by American culture of unawareness and assimilation. Make no mistake about it. We're going to carry the torch forward. The previous Rebbe defied the conventional wisdom. And of course, as we know, all those schools he worked on were built, were opened. The mikvahs, the Torah centers, the publishing houses, all opened. Now in 1950, he passes away. And at first, his son-in-law is reluctant and not willing to take on the leadership. Even though all the Hasidim recognize him as the next Rebbe, he refuses to accept that leadership. And then on this day, on the first anniversary of his passing, 1951, exactly 70 years from tonight, he assumed and accepted the leadership of Chabad. And the torch began to shine with even greater radiance and intensity. Now, the Rebbe, in his opening talk, called on his Hasidim and his followers to share his vision for a brighter future for all, to seize the moment. He looked us straight in the eye and he said, you can make a difference. You can impact the community. You can change the world. You, teenagers, young couples, stand tall, strengthen yourself. He used the motto, Ufaratzta Yama V'Kedma V'Tzafona V'Negba, spread out. Go to Israel, go to Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia, North America, South America, East Coast, West Coast, go. And think about it, because the conventional wisdom of Rebbes and Hasidic movements was to build up their community, to build it up as strong as they can. And here comes this young new Rebbe, and he's saying, go. Crown Heights will survive without you. You know who needs you? The world needs you. Pick a part of the world and go. Emboldened by this inspiration, first tens and then hundreds and then thousands of emissaries went forth onto every continent in this world. And Chabad evolved into this vital worldwide network of schools and Chabad centers and outreach centers spanning the globe. This bold vision that he expressed on his first day officially as Rebbe, and his boundless love and his relentless leadership rekindled the spirit of the post-Holocaust generation. I want to go to 1972. It's a special year, and I'll tell you why. The Rebbe was approaching his 70th birthday. Again, that number 70. And that number 70 is an important number in Judaism. So by the Rebbe's 70th birthday, there was this build-up as we came closer and closer, literally from months before the 70th birthday. And there were these well-meaning disciples who suggested to the Rebbe that now that you're reaching your 70th birthday, perhaps it's time to slow down a bit, to cut down the hours a little bit, stop putting in the late nights and the early mornings, and you need to take care of your health and your well-being. But they should have known better, because this was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he never slowed down. So as we're getting closer to his birthday, to the 70th birthday, the Rebbe spoke and he said, you know, there's a tradition in this country that there is something called a birthday gift, that gifts are given in honor of a birthday. So I would like to ask for my birthday gift in advance so that you have some time to work on it. And of course, it's very quiet in the room as to what is exactly the Lubavitcher Rebbe asking for his birthday gift. And what he wanted was 70 new Chabad institutions. That would be the gift that he would really appreciate. Now, in 1972, there weren't thousands of Chabad centers like there are now. There were quite a few, but not that many. So asking for 70 was huge. But of course, the Rebbe asks, his Hasidim would listen. A special credit to Rabbi Boris Shlomo Kunin of the West Coast Chabad, who took on many of these 70. So many of the Chabad centers that you are familiar with were part of that 1972 Rebbe's request of his birthday, part of that movement. Chabad of the Valley, of which Chabad of the Conejo came from, was one of those Chabad centers that Rabbi Kunin presented to the Lubavitcher Rebbe on his 70th birthday. So here it is on the eve of that historic birthday. There's a Farbrengen going on. It was packed. I was a young kid, but I remember it. It was packed to the rafters. It always was packed, but this time you literally could not fit another human being in that room. And the Rebbe is handed this list, and it was more than 70, of over 70 new centers to be opened during the course of that year. And you can see it on his face. He was pleased. He was happy. There was joy. And in between the talks of that particular Farbrengen, of that gathering, individuals came up in between. The Rebbe spoke and then they sang. So when they sang, people would have a chance to come up to the Rebbe and say a few words. There was this delegation from California, and they approached the Rebbe to present him with a key to one of the Chabad houses. It's yours. It's a gift to you. And so they made this beautiful plaque with the gold key on it, and they presented it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to them that what you're experiencing tonight, the growth, the opening of 70 institutions, this is going to become a pattern. It's not just this year. And Chabad is going to become, he said, and he used the words, like a chain store. And very soon there's going to be Chabad houses all over the country and all over the world. This was his prediction. So much for retirement. And in the decades that followed, the Rebbe would continue to launch initiative after initiative, campaign after campaign, project after project. And the consistent underlying message was, carry the torch forward. Educate more children, reach out to more families, touch more lives, wherever they may be, whoever they may be. As to the Rebbe's prediction on the eve of his 70th birthday, wow, would it be proven correct? The Rebbe said Chabad would become like chain stores. Macy's could only dream of the type of growth that Chabad has seen. Pre-pandemic, I don't know what the number is now, there was a total in the world of 839 Macy's department stores. There are well over 4,000 Chabad centers today, manned by over 5,000 shluchim and shluchos. There is hardly a city, a town, or a village where a Jew resides on the face of the earth where Chabad doesn't have a presence yet. The Rebbe's inspiration, the Rebbe's mandate, continues to echo all across the global expanse. As Rabbi Tolushkin said when he spoke at our gala a few years ago after he published the book Rebbe, and he said this, we are bearing witness to the greatest renaissance of Jewish life in history, not in a century, not in a decade, in our entire history. How did he do it? How did the Rebbe accomplish this? Well, for one, who am I to say? The Rebbe was a holy tzaddik, a unique individual, one of the greatest that ever lived. So far be it from us to tell each other how the Rebbe did it. And there's so many books that have been written trying to analyze the Rebbe's strategy, the Rebbe's game plan, his philosophy, good books. I'm neither a scholar, nor am I a historian, nor am I a philosopher. I would like to just focus, though, on one aspect, just one aspect of the Rebbe's approach. The story is told of one of the great shluchim of the previous generation, Rabbi Chaim HaKohen Gutnick, of blessed memory. He was a very prominent and prestigious rabbi in Australia. He was president of the Rabbinical Council of Victoria. He was chaplain of the Australian Defense Force. He was a very dynamic and eloquent speaker. When he spoke, he would paint and picture this vivid, breathtaking color of what he was trying to describe. And the audience would be enraptured by his words. So the story goes that he was once asked by the Lubavitcher Rebbe to offer a lecture on the topic of mikvah, of family purity for women in Melbourne. This is years ago, decades ago. Rabbi Gutnick, for his part, was extremely apprehensive about this event because at that point, mikvah was not spoken about in public. It was a very private thing spoken between Rebbitzin and a woman. And here the Rebbe was saying, take it public, speak about it at a public lecture. And he didn't know if people were going to come for this, if they had interest in it. But the Rebbe is pushing for it very strongly. And the Rebbe is saying directly to him, I want you to do this. Of course, you do it. And the Rebbe asked for a report after the lecture was over. Tell me how it went. And so if you're going to do it, because the Rebbe asked you to do it, you're going to do it right. You're going to publicize it. You're going to make flyers. You're going to rent a ballroom in a hotel. You're going to do everything you possibly can to attract a crowd. And then you're going to put yourself into this lecture. You're going to work hard on it. You're going to make sure it's a powerful talk, an inspirational talk. So what happened? Rabbi Gutnick shows up for his talk. And he experiences what we in the rabbinical business would call our worst nightmare. You see, many of you think that our worst nightmare is if we plan an event and no one shows up. It's not a good feeling, but it's not our worst nightmare. The reason it's not our worst nightmare is because if no one showed up, no one knows that no one showed up. So there's no embarrassment. We feel let down, but no embarrassment in the public. The worst, the nightmare is when only one person shows up. Because now everyone will know that you did an event, you publicized an event, and only one person showed up. And you still have to deliver the talk because one person is there. So he gives his talk on the mikveh. He does the best he can. And the next day he submits his report to the Rebbe. And it was filled with great distress and disappointment. It was a disaster. It was a failure. It was the worst speaking engagement of my career. I set up this room for hundreds of people to show for this advertised talk. And in the end, one woman, one single solitary woman showed up for this monumental historic address on the subject of mikveh, of family purity. It was a downbeat report that he submitted. The Rebbe's response to him was quick, short, and simple. It was one line. The line said, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, Moses, our leader, only had one mother. That was the answer. What does it take to change the world? He's asking Rabbi Gutnick. It takes one person. One person. The Talmud says, Lefichach nivra adam yechidi, the reason that God created the human being, Adam and Eve, singularly, individually, unlike other living things that he created in bunches, entire species at a time, was to teach us that one person equals an entire world. That every individual is an olam mali, an entire world for him or herself. And whoever sustains the soul of a single Jew, Kilu Kiyam Olam Male, is reckoned as having saved an entire world. Every single Jewish soul is an entire world. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, had one mother. Yocheved was one woman who was responsible for shaping the direction and destiny of humanity for all time to come. That one woman who showed up for Rabbi Gutnick's lecture, who is she? Where is she today? I don't know. Is it possible because of that one inspiring talk she heard about mikveh, she is now the matriarch of generations of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Perhaps one of them or many of them are serving as emissaries somewhere in the world, affecting thousands of other lives. Who knows? This was the Rebbe's message to Rabbi Gutnick. This was the Rebbe's message to every one of his emissaries. This was the Rebbe's message to every one of you. One matters. An individual matters. One mitzvah matters. One study of one verse of Torah matters. One Jew matters. Stop looking for big numbers. That's not how we change a world. We change a world one person at a time, because that one person is an entire world. We just had a haftorah from Isaiah, I believe it was last week or the week before. And Isaiah is prophesying concerning the era of Mashiach. And he says this line, V'atem teluktu echod echod. In that period of time, when we're about ready for the coming of Mashiach, which I sincerely believe is right now, you will gather the Jewish people, and Isaiah says, Echad, Echad. Do you know what that means? Echad, one by one, one by one. For the Rebbe, that wasn't just some lofty poetic idea or a handy catchphrase. It was his real philosophy, and he put it into action. This was his mantra, to look to echad, echad, go after, inspire, teach, befriend, welcome, embrace, one Jew at a time, one mitzvah at a time. And there was this interview that I saw with a Rabbi Cousins from England on one of the weekly videos that are put out. And he talks about a period of time that still goes on in New York called the release time hour. It's known as the Wednesday hour because it takes place on Wednesdays. But the public schools in New York State and in other states allow for religious training for 1 hour a week. And so it has been organized, especially in Crown Heights quite well. The Yeshiva College in 770 Eastern Parkway allows all of their students to go out. They're assigned a particular public school, and they go there on a Wednesday afternoon for that 1 hour of teaching public school children whose parents agree that they could be removed from class and study religious training for that 1 hour. And so someone that Rabbi Cousins knew signed up for this program, and then he wrote the Lubavitcher Rebbe a letter. And in his letter, he writes that I'm a serious learner. I enjoy the study of Talmud. I'm not the most social individual. And the Wednesday hour program is not just an hour. First of all, it's preparation time. Secondly, the train to that school is an hour. The train back is an hour. So as it is, I'm missing literally an entire afternoon of study. And being that I'm not social anyway, and I'm not that great in talking to kids, I think it would be a good idea for me to back out of this program so that I can devote myself more to the study of Talmud. And he's expecting the Rebbe's permission to drop out so he can devote more time to learning. It's a nice request. This is what the Rebbe said. I want you to know that all the sages of the Talmud in heaven, all the sages of the holy leaders of our people who are in heaven, even the soul of Moses himself, are envious of you, that you have the opportunity to say one verse, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, or make one blessing with a Jewish child in a public school who's not receiving a Jewish education, and you have the opportunity to reach that Jewish child. They look from heaven and they're jealous that they don't have that opportunity. So you would rather sit and study their teachings, and they're telling you from heaven, that's where you should be. Wow. This is how the Rebbe saw each and every Jewish child. This is how the Rebbe saw each and every individual mitzvah. This is how he inspired all of his followers to go out there to every part of the world, to follow the verse of Isaiah, the Atem, to look to echad echad, one person at a time, one child at a time, one mitzvah at a time. I'm going to go a little bit longer than I normally do. It's a special occasion. It's a 70th anniversary for us and for you. One of the most widely read books of the 20th century was The Diary of Anne Frank. It was published in more than 60 different languages. It is the eloquent and heart-wrenching words of a 13-year-old Jewish girl written over the course of 2 years while she was in hiding with her family during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. The family was apprehended in 1944, and Anne Frank ultimately perished in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. If you're familiar with her diary, if you've read her diary, she describes how she would look out from the attic through the only window that was not blacked out to prevent anyone from seeing movement in the annex in which they were hiding. And she describes seeing the garden, and she talks about a particular tree. It was a chestnut tree that she could see from that window. And she writes, nearly every morning I go to the attic to blow the stuffy air out of my lungs. And from my favorite spot on the floor, I look at the blue sky and the bare chestnut tree on whose branches little raindrops shine, appearing like silver, and at the seagulls and other birds as they glide on the wind. As long as they exist, I may live to see it, the sunshine, the cloudless skies. While this lasts, I cannot be unhappy. The last time Anne wrote about the chestnut tree was in her entry on May 13th, 1944, shortly before her family was discovered. And she writes, our chestnut tree is now in full bloom. It's covered with leaves, and it's even more beautiful than last year. Why am I telling you about Anne Frank's chestnut tree? That tree represented Anne Frank's longing for freedom. It gave her the will to live. It gave her the hope to carry on. It gave her the inspiration to share words that would be immortalized for all time as a stark portrayal of the contrast between the ultimate of cruelty and evil versus the ultimate of innocence and purity. Anne Frank's stately and majestic tree, as it turns out, was one of the oldest chestnut trees in all of Amsterdam. Unfortunately, several years ago, it was discovered that the tree was diseased and had to be cut down, lest it fall down and cause serious damage or injury. So what happened? A group of people took the sap of that tree and they germinated it, from which they created hundreds of saplings. And these saplings, consisting of the exact DNA as the old tree, were then given to schools and Jewish organizations all over the world to nurture and to grow. Anne Frank's life, like 6 million others, was tragically cut short. But her tree, that legacy of hope and freedom and human dignity, lives on because it's been transplanted within the hearts of millions, within the very consciousness of humanity. If you think about it, this is what the legacy of the Lubavitcher Rebbe was all about. Planting trees, creating orchards, bringing life, beauty, goodness to all of mankind. The Rebbe wouldn't allow our tree, the tree of Judaism, the tree of the Jewish people, the tree of the 6 million, to be destroyed, to disappear. The Rebbe spent his life replanting, rebuilding, not one tree, but thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews touched by his inspiration, by his teachings, by his love, by his warmth, by his embrace. And today we see how the dream of this leader has indeed illuminated a world. And he did it to look to echad, echad, one person at a time, one child at a time, one mitzvah at a time. Shabbat shalom to all of you. May we live with the Rebbe's teachings. May it inspire us indeed to take upon ourselves yet one more mitzvah and reach yet one more Jew. May we indeed celebrate very, very soon the coming of Moshiach Tzidkenu. May it happen speedily in our days. Amen.